Out of My Mind is the name of a book, a powerful novel written by Sharon Draper. Uh, and the book follows a girl, Melody Brooks, a brilliant 11-year-old who has cerebral palsy and cannot walk or speak. Both of my girls read this book when I think they were in 5th grade, elementary school, and our family actually just watched the movie made based on this book recently. And Melody, the main character, is trapped in a body that won't cooperate, but she has this incredible memory and a sharp mind. But because she can't speak and she struggles to express herself, almost everyone underestimates her. So she spends her days in a special class that is supposed to be for kids like her, but she is so bored, so very bored, until finally someone comes along and notices. They get this sense that more is happening in Melody's mind than anyone can see. And this woman suggests that maybe Melody needs something more from her education. And so the school makes this effort to integrate her into a mainstream classroom. And the story then is about how Melody tries to find her place among students who don't have her same challenges to communicate. I had read the book years ago when they read it in elementary school, and I remember back then being moved by it, but I couldn't quite, sort of remember all the parts of the story. But as we watched recently, the scenes play out of Melody trying to participate in class, of Melody trying to join the school's academic quiz team. It was really hard to watch. Because Melody was as smart, if not smarter, than almost every other student. But because of her cerebral palsy, it took her extra time and effort to communicate, to get what she wanted to say communicated. But no one around her had the patience to wait for her or really to listen to her. And so again and again, she is treated like an outsider who doesn't belong in the various groups she shows up in. Even after she proves her brilliance over and over. And this story, it's just like beautiful and it's heart-wrenching. And maybe it's like on my mind and heart because it stands in such contrast to this experience I had in Tenerife in Spain with Alex a couple weeks ago. Because as you know, we went to visit Samuel there, and Samuel invited Alex and me to go over to his friend's house for their weekly young adult dinner on Saturday night. And besides us, there were 12 or 13 others, all of them from different countries in Latin America, all of them in their mid-20s, all of them Spanish-speaking. There were several people there who spoke no English at all. And I've always known that Alex could speak Spanish, but it wasn't until I was there with him in a setting like this where I realized, he speaks it really well. He's just in the conversations, and nobody's saying, your Spanish is pretty good. They're just having real conversations, and I'm watching this and everything else because I know zero Spanish. None. It was obvious that I was going to struggle during this night, as I had in a couple other moments on our trip. The room was just filled with Spanish. Conversations all around the table in Spanish. And I just felt like this was going to be a long night. Just a couple nights before, Alex and I had been at a prayer meeting where everyone prayed one after the other in Spanish. And an hour is not long for a prayer meeting. But when you understand zero words except for Padre and Jesus Christ, you just, it's a long night. And so I was like, okay, We're in for this. And what's fascinating is that Samuel's friends had known that we were coming. And so they actually tweaked their plans they planned dinner to be an American Thanksgiving dinner, which was fun, although I think the only actual Thanksgiving food that we would recognize was the mashed potatoes. There were other things as well. But they asked us to talk about Thanksgiving and explain it because it's an American thing. And Alex and Samuel translated my English into Spanish for everyone. And I just found myself as an outsider, as an actual foreigner, like they wanted me to participate. They wanted me to contribute to the things that were happening this night. And so they were already trying to make us feel welcome with an American Thanksgiving, but then they went out of their way all night long with me to include me in everything that was happening, right? Like there'd be conversation and everybody would start laughing and they could see that I was just like, huh? And someone would say, English for Curtis, or somebody would just say, translate, and would point to Alex or to Samuel. And right, like, to be candid, there is like a part of me that hated getting any special treatment that night. Like I didn't want conversations to stop just so everyone could look at me while I was being translated and everybody could watch to see if I laughed, like to the same thing that happened. Like I didn't want everyone to stop laughing and having a good time just so they could be like, oh yeah, and Curtis now. Like as much as I hated it, I felt so welcome. It was incredible how hard everyone worked to make sure that I was a part of the whole experience. Like I actually belonged there. Although Melody from Out of My Mind and I are very different, we have something in common. Right? We both found ourselves on the outside of a group that was very different from us. And those differences made it very hard to communicate. And so those differences required real work to make us feel welcome. But both of these stories, they introduce us to a core theme throughout the Bible. The practice that we translate into English as hospitality. Quick language lesson. The English word hospitality is used to translate the Greek word xenophilia. Xenophilia. Say it with me, xenophilia. That's fun. Some of you have probably come across the word xenophobia or xenophobic. Even if you haven't, you might recognize the phobic or phobia, right? It's fear, to be afraid of something. So to be xenophobic is to be afraid of people who are different. It's to be afraid of a stranger, to be afraid of a foreigner, to be afraid of someone who feels other. If xenophobic is the fear of a stranger, xenophilia, you might recognize philia as like Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Philia. Xenophilia is the love of a stranger. It is to love the person that is different from you. The stranger, the foreigner, the person who feels other in some way. And in the same way that we explored last week, that community originates in God's very own self, that God in forever relationship with himself, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If we get to experience community, it's only because God has existed eternally in community with himself. Well, hospitality is also who God is. Hospitality is what God does. It's what God has been doing from the very beginning. Because the moment God creates, he makes something that is foreign to himself. something that is other than himself, right? He is the creator, and all of the stuff that he makes, including us, is the creation, creatures. But God doesn't just like make stuff. He wants to be in relationship with the stuff he makes. And so, of the stuff he makes living stuff that can actually be responsive and in relationship with him. And he creates for the living stuff a habitable space, a place for creatures where we can live and where we can thrive, a place where he can meet with us. From the very beginning, we see a God who loves within himself and who loves creatures that are not like him. Which is why, from the very beginning, when God selects a people to be his people, as we read in the book of Genesis, as he calls a man named Abraham and he calls their family, he chooses this people, he makes it very clear that they are to love and bless those who are not like them. And so God chooses Israel, not so that Israel can spend eternity with God by themselves. No, he chooses Israel to bring other people groups into relationship with him so that God can spend eternity with Israel and the rest of the world. This is what God starts at the beginning. But we read the Hebrew Bible and we discover very quickly that Israel loses their way, and they continue to lose their way again and again, right? Because God meant his people to be faithful as he is faithful, but they were unfaithful. They turned from God and they did their own thing. God meant Israel to be his disciples, his students, so that they could become holy like he is holy, so that they might love their neighbors as he had loved them. He wanted them to become like him through a process of discipleship, but they rejected God and his character, and instead they became They became like the brutal and selfish gods of their neighbors. And God meant Israel to be formed as one people. But almost immediately, they begin to divide from each other, and they fight each other. They reject each other, and they imagine that they can somehow go it alone. And so, obviously, right, like if they have rejected God, rejected God's character and mission, and rejected their fellow people, God's people, right? I mean, they aren't really offering much to their neighbors by way of inspiration. Like, hey, come check out our God. And so they also fail at hospitality. Right? In every way, the Hebrew Bible tells us God's people, they fail God in their core tasks, their core reason for existing. But at the bottom, at the base of their failure, prophets come along. Prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah. And these prophets have a message. You have failed God, but God will never fail you. God hasn't given up on you. God will not fail his people. Because God cannot help but be faithful to his promises. He cannot help but be faithful to what he started. And he makes a promise that once again, his people will be restored. And we just heard about this beautiful restoration in the Ezekiel passage that Jane read for us. But God goes further, right? Because when he restores his people, they will finally recognize their God, who he is, who he has been for them from the very beginning. Ezekiel 34:30 says, "They shall know that I am Yahweh, their God with them. And they, the house of Israel, are my people." God goes on, no longer speaking in the third person, but addressing them directly. You might be lost and scattered and far from me right now, but this is what is true. You are my sheep, human sheep of my pasture, and I am your God. This is what God plans to do. This is what the people are waiting for. They are waiting for a secure and abundant life given by the God who hasn't given up on them. And this is exactly what God begins to do on that very first Christmas, when God gives his very own son, born to be the good shepherd for his people. But there is this tension that exists in the Christmas story. It's there from the very beginning. Because Jesus will grow up to say, and we get this in the Gospel of John 14:14, he will say, "I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd." Jesus is expressing the hospitable heart of his Father. He's telling his people, there are others besides you to be included in God's family, to be included among God's people. But Israel continues to forget this part of their calling. Sometimes people can read the Hebrew scriptures as though God loves the Israelites and hates everyone else. But this is a gross misreading of the Bible. In fact, at the very same time that Ezekiel was reminding Israel that God had not given up on them, there were other prophets like Isaiah who were busy reminding Israel and the outsiders to Israel that God had not given up on anyone. And we heard Jane read Isaiah's promise as well. Isaiah 56, verse 8, "Yahweh God, who gathered the outcasts of Israel, declares, I will gather yet others to him besides these already gathered." Isaiah is addressing people who thought that they had been permanently excluded from God's presence. Two groups. The first, eunuchs. People whose bodies had been so mutilated that if you think that the image of God is a physical representation, you would be inclined to say, there's no way this person could be in the image of God anymore. There were a number of reasons, but what's important is to know that they were excluded from the temple. The eunuchs were out. And the foreigners, who were considered unclean because they had worshiped other gods, the foreigners were excluded from the temple, the place where you came to meet with God. But Isaiah announces that God is not done with the eunuchs, and God is not done with the foreigners. That there is a future for those who will join themselves to him. For those who want to serve God, for those who want to love God's name, who want to be used by him, you can be the outcast of all outcasts, but God wants to claim you as his own. And Isaiah announces that God's household will be a household made up of all nations. Not one nation, not some nations, not most nations, of all nations. A home for all peoples to pray and to connect with him. I mean, this is incredible, right? Because this was a core part of God's promise from the very beginning. And it is a core part of the promise of Christmas. But it is a part of the story that God's people forgot about, that they neglected. And it seems to me that human communities are really good. We have this tendency to look around, appreciate, and be glad for those who are here, and forget that God still has others together. At the time of Jesus, some of the Jewish people, his very own family members, the people he came to, struggled to even see other Jewish people as being included in God's promises. I mean, how could they possibly imagine eunuchs and foreigners and like us? I mean, Jane made the comment. The people that Jesus was present with could not have imagined us as part of God's family. And yet, I said there's this tension, right? Because in the stories around Jesus' birth, you have these poor nobody shepherds that are the first to see and recognize Jesus. And then you have these foreign wise men. And so we get these hints that this birth is about so much more. One of the easiest ways to assess how we are doing in all of our core values is to look at hospitality. Are we faithful to the God who has made space for us in his life and in his world? Are we becoming like this God who loves the stranger, the foreigner, the outcast, the enemy? In our community, is our community a people with whom strangers feel welcome? Do those who are different from us see us, experience us, actively trying to help them belong and participate? Are we a people who pray for our enemies and who lay down our lives for them? Are our homes open? Are our neighborhood groups open? Are our church buildings and resources open? Are we open and welcoming to those who are like us? Or are we genuinely and actively trying to include those as well who are very different from us? In any of the various ways someone might be different from you. The gospel shows us what hospitality looks like, right? Because it is more than just God creating space for creatures to thrive, like planting a garden and going, all right, live and grow. It's more than God just trying to rescue us from our failures. It's not just, oh, they've died. I'll water them more. I'll continue to try to help them recover. We see the gospel in Jesus, the gospel, the good news, the Son of God who gave up his life for us. As Paul says it, while we were still sinners. While we were enemies of God. When we were set against God, when we were busy rejecting God, when we were wanting nothing to do with God or God's presence or God's promises, while we were entrenched in an eternal battle against the good creator of all things, he responds by moving toward us and then giving his life for us. The ultimate act of hospitality, love for the enemy. And so hospitality isn't about just being nice to strangers. It's about becoming people so transformed by the hospitable love of God that we begin to offer costly love. Love that brings light and life to our enemies. The season of Advent isn't just about waiting for Jesus to come. Because while we wait, we get to join Jesus in gathering others to himself. Because the shepherd is still calling. And the question for us is, are we willing to make room among God's people for more? Hospitality is who our God is. Like, we get to be hospitable because God was hospitable to us. And so I wonder this week how God might use us, might use you to gather someone to himself. Is there someone in your life who needs to hear about Jesus? And maybe our Christmas Eve service is the place where they get to or might hear. Is there someone who needs to be invited to one of your Christmas parties this week, a New Year's party, some event that you're going to? They just need to know that they are seen and they need to be part of your family, your group of friends, your circle, whatever it is. Is there someone in your orbit who just this week needs to know that they are seen by you and by God? Is there someone around you that you know who just needs to feel loved? As I think about the various gifts the Magi bring to Jesus, I wonder if we might come with a gift. One costly act of welcome to the person who might not believe they belong. But before we give that gift, we get to gather around the table to remember that we have something to offer only because of the costly gift that was given for us.